Welcome back to Soul Sessions.
With Creative Mind.
That's right.
And what is today's topic today, Rob?
We're continuing our hero's journey into...
Mythology?
Yeah, we've been doing a series on myths and how they relate to emotions, psychology, our work in life.
Personal growth.
Yeah.
And so we talked about shame. We talked about love. We talked about anger. And today we're going to talk about everyone's favorite topic, fear and transformation and how it relates to the myth of the hero. And Joseph Campbell was very popular in his hero's journey epic, bringing in all these myths. And we're going to go deeper into that today because we're all on a journey. We're all on a hero or heroine's journey in our life, whether we like it or not.
Yes, Frank Herbert says in Dune, fear is the mind killer.
Ooh.
We know fear is definitely the dream killer or the dream stealer, in that if you let fear take root in your life, in your mind, it will rob you of all your potential.
So let's talk about the hero's journey. I'm sure everyone's heard of the hero's journey or heard the term actually. What is the hero's journey? How would you describe it?
Yeah, it is a metaphor for individuation. And in general, it's a metaphor for our journey through life. All right, we're born into this great adventure that we call our life. And then we have to figure it out. We have to find our way. We face all these challenges and fears, and the task for us is to to face those challenges and fears, and kind of persevere against all odds.
And I have maybe I could talk about the stages of the hero's journey, the way we see it. There's a lot of interpretations of it. This is our interpretation of it. That's a little more practical than going out and slaying the dragon, because there aren't any dragons except within our own mind. It all starts out first with the ordinary world, where you're in, your ordinary life, the conditioned experience of life from early on. We condition ourselves to basically survive in the world. So it's really that survival mind, doing with the herd mentality, the community and the family, and what society tells us we should be. And then the next stage is a calling. And we have this kind of calling to feel like there's more to life. And some of us have that calling when we're really young. Other of us were 70 years old and say, what the heck did I do with my life? And I need to wake up. So it happens at different times, but typically, according to Jung, that calling happens around midlife. So we have this like midlife crisis in a way, where we start to question all the things we built up in our life and say, is this what I really want? And so then we have the calling, and then we have the refusal of the call. And we refuse it because the ego loves our conditioned response. So there's always that refusal. And feel free to jump in anytime.
Thank you.
And so,
well, I was thinking, let's go through the whole stages, and then we'll kind of take one at a time and talk about how fear plays into each stage of the hero's journey.
So the ordinary world, the calling, and then the refusal of the call. And then right there at the refusal of the call, there's a threshold. And the threshold is basically moving beyond that ego voice that says, don't go there. And we venture out and try something new, start a new business, go for a relationship, start a workout routine, or transform our body, be healthy, like some kind of a change in our life. Maybe get divorced from our partner, maybe with like, I'm done with this, or move to another place. So we decide to cross that threshold. And when we cross that threshold, we've made a commitment to change. So commitment is right after that threshold. Then after we make the commitment, there's confusion, a stage of confusion. And we'll tell you why that happens.
I'm stuck in that one.
Yeah. And then there's a stage where you meet your spiritual guide.
Yeah.
And that's someone on the outside that can tell you or shine the light for you and say, I've been on this journey. I know where you're going. I know why you're stuck. And let me bring more clarity to the situation. It takes you out of that confusion and basically reminds you of your mission.
You meet Yoda.
Yoda, yeah. And then there's the trial, which is now, okay, you have this spiritual guide, and in some heroes' journeys, they say they give you special magical tools, a sword or a shield,
A ring.
Or a magic ring, or, some kind of magical thing that helps you on your journey. And then the trial is you're facing this adversary. And in movies and TV and these heroes' journeys that play out in stories and books, it's usually like a monster or some kind of threat, the enemy. And then, and through fighting that adversary, you get a treasure. You get some kind of reward, whether it's you get accolades from the city, you save the city, or you become the king, crowned the knight, or whatever that is. And then there's another threshold you go to. You got the reward, and then you kind of go over, and then it's called the return, where you return back to your original spot, but not in the same place, because you've gone on that journey. Now you've transformed. So it's never the same. And so you return home, and you see that home has changed for you.
Yeah, that's the completeness or the completion of the hero's journey.
That cycle. And the thing is, a lot of people think it's just once in your life, but you go through these stages. The first one is big, and then there's always these cycles that you go through and to go to the next level.
Yeah. So let's start at the beginning. So we're all kind of born into the ordinary world, the village life, the society, the culture that we are born into. And our first task is to adapt to that society, this world.
Do what our parents expect, do what the culture expects of us.
Yeah, and
Be
that
responsible.
that itself is kind of a challenge, right, for human beings, because we don't all start off with the same skills and intelligence. We all start off at different places with different obstacles. But we all kind of manage. Most of us that have gotten to this point, we manage somehow to find a way. But the hero certainly is a symbol in the Jungian sense and in the Joseph Campbell sense, is someone who is going to step outside, go beyond the ordinary world. Their calling is beyond the ordinary. And it's a metaphor, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that the person...
You have to leave your hometown.
Yeah, they don't have to leave their hometown, but they have to leave the comfort of their conditioning, their learning within that culture, within that family, within the society that they grew up in.
I think for me, moving to Colorado when I was 29, I feel like that was a hero's journey, a stage of my hero's journey. It's like, kind of moving away from my family, all my friends that I conditioned, people that I've been around that reflected my current identity, and then stepping into meeting new friends, having a different life, different experiences, starting that process. But I was scared when I did it. I was like, wanting to go back, but it was too late. I had moved over there, and immediately I was thinking I need to go back.
Yeah, and we'd be fools if we weren't scared, essentially, because it is scary to go into the unknown. And what life is doing there, it's calling us to enter the unknown aspects of our mind, of our psyche. And the people that dare to go are the ones that end up transforming culture, transforming society, coming up with new ideas, new ways of doing things. And so it's an important function for human beings to have. Not everyone is called to do it or is able to accept the call. Maybe that's a better way of putting it. But those of us that are willing to accept the call, then we go on our journey. And the first obstacle, the first kind of hurdle that we have to face is our own fear, like you mentioned. Our fear of the unknown, our fear of what's going to happen to me if I leave my happy home, my comfort zone.
I see this with entrepreneurs. They start a business and the fears of, oh, this is so different than my corporate job, and I'm on my own and I'm my own boss, and that hesitation of, did I make the right decision? And I think it's normal to have that. And I think if people knew that it was normal, they would not buy into the fear as much. But to understand that fear is part of it. Like, you're not, like, this idea that you're going to be fearless and live without fear is kind of dull. I mean, fear in itself is what we have to survive. Like, it's a survival mechanism, but it's also energy. And so if we just let it basically direct us to stop, it could be make us powerless. But if we learn to channel that fear and motivate, use it as a motivation, everything can change. Because we're also motivated by fear. Because if you think about it, you can either be afraid of the change or you can fear the status quo. And for me, point. I was like, I am not going to live my life. I'm not going back to the corporate world. I'm not going back to New Jersey. I got to keep pushing through. So fear can actually either push you forward or keep you stuck.
One of the reasons the hero refuses the call is because of fear. Again, what's going to happen to me? What's beyond this threshold that that the calling is asking me to cross? And the threshold, psychologically, it is entering what Jung calls the unconscious, the symbolic life.
Going deeper into yourself.
Yes, asking that question, what am I really made out of? Am I ready to test myself by trying to do something different, something new that is not expected of me in the society that I am actually called to do because I have a dream, because I have a vision.
Kind of like a call of duty without all the guns and violence. It's the call of duty. It's a spiritual duty.
That's right.
To live your full, like, you're here for a reason. Find out what that reason is. Yes.
So often we might take that step even though we're terrified and we're frightened, we're afraid, but we know there's something powerful on the other side of that threshold, and we go ahead and cross it.
And so I always think of that saying, I don't know if everyone watched The Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit, where Frodo and Sam are leaving the Shire, which is their ordinary world. And he said, if I take the next step I take, I'll be the furthest I've ever been from the Shire. And that's kind of how we feel. We're like, oh, wait, I'm going to take that step and my life is going to change. And as we take this step inward, we can never, once we realize what lies beneath us and what's within us, we can never be the same again. And so the ego's terrified of change. So we have to understand that it's not really scary except for the ego. And so once we make that commitment, what the confusion is another way fear shows up.
Yeah. Once we make the commitment to change, to undergo that transformation, to accept the dark night of the soul, then the confusion sets in because we're in the unknown now. We don't have a map. We don't have a way to navigate like we do in the outer sphere with regular knowledge. We know, okay, I can ask my teachers, I can go to the university, I can ask my parents, I can ask my grandparents, my friends.
It's kind of feeling lost a little bit and like out of doubting yourself. And that confusion is that, why did I cross that damn threshold?
Somebody should have physically stopped me.
Like it's too late. It's a point of no return, but you're still thinking about what if I just stayed where I was, right?
Yeah, there's that longing for our comfort zone, the familiar, and there's no going back at a certain point.
And it feels very discombobulating, especially when you do the inner work, like when we do shadow work. You're the identity that you relied upon so much for security and a go-to, and your survival kit that you use that seemed to help you function in the world is like kind of thrown out the window. And now you have to really cultivate, who do I want to be in this situation? Who make conscious decisions? And it's empowering, but also scary because there's a tendency to want to rely on the old way you used to do things, and stepping into doing something new, like speaking up or trying something, or speaking in public that you've never done before. The ego, it's doing its job. It's saying, slow down. So confusion is a state of fear that we get into, and the confusion can create more fear. But if we want to really work with it, we have to say, oh, I see what's happening. You're conscious of the journey that you're on, and you're saying, this is why I'm confused. It doesn't mean that I can't make it. It means that I just maybe don't know what the next step is yet, and just go inside and get divine guidance. Go in. It's a place to go inward, versus giving up or stopping. Because if you stop in this point, like, it's almost better if you just never took the journey at all. But you see people who go halfway and they stop, and they just stay in that confusion, and sometimes for a long time if they don't have a guide to take them on the way. So then the guide swoops in. At the time, the hero is like, oh, I just want to give up, right? That kind of, you always see those stories where it's like, oh, like, I can't take one more step, and then the magical wizard appears, or something comes in and offers guidance.
Exactly. Confusion, let's say, is a state of chaos, and chaos cannot really exist for very long in the universe. There is really no pure chaos. There's always a tendency towards order, towards form, towards structure. And so the structure comes in now at a higher level through a spiritual teaching, higher knowledge, a deeper understanding. It might be just a book that opens up a door for you. Maybe a teacher, maybe a coach, maybe a mentor,
a guru,
maybe just an internal resource that you find within yourself, that you say, I have this faith, this way of understanding my confusion and my path, the path that I'm on, that's guiding me from within. So it doesn't necessarily take one form. It can take many forms and a variety of forms.
And actually, a great spiritual guide or coach helps you cultivate that resource within yourself, not give you all the answers or come in and swoop and rescue you. They're really reflective of your own inner wisdom. And so sometimes you can't find it within yourself, so you need someone on the outside to reflect it back to you. That's all it is. It's not the source, but a reflection.
Yes. And
I always find they come at the right time. Like the right people, they always say that when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a metaphor for that stage of finding your way with higher knowledge, understanding. Now, what do you need that knowledge for? It is for a trial that's coming up. In other words, you thought the trial was undergoing or starting the journey, but the trial hasn't really arrived until this point or after this point, because now you really have to face your shadow, your deepest fear. What's behind door number 3, that you don't know.
That you locked up and threw away the passcode so you wouldn't open it.
Yeah.
And the trial is facing really your deepest fear.
Yeah.
No, it's not an external fear. It appears external sometimes, but really is your own deepest fear, your ego's deepest fear, and being able to face it. And that's what's going to give you the treasure, which is the next step.
Well, you're jumping the gun, but because here in a lot of hero myths, the hero's not sure they can make it. I mean, the stakes have to be real. This is not, let's say...
for real transformation, it's not fluffing it away and bulldozing your way through
or
the
just
difficult times.
pretending to face these things. It has to be a real dangerous situation for yourself, right? As a soul, as an individual. The stakes are very high, and you have to use all your resources, all your knowledge, all your skills. That's why often in the stories, the hero at this point is given magical weapons. You can say psychologically, you can think of them as understandings or techniques to work with your mind so that the fear doesn't overwhelm you or the anger doesn't take control of you. you're able to manage those things and face that big challenge that is the shadow, the real transformation.
And then the treasure is that the payoff is so high when you face that fear. Just like, I mean, I know for me, I'm terrified of speaking in public. So I have that like anxiety before I talk. And then after the talk, I feel so great. But it's like I went through and faced that fear. And sometimes it's so unconscious, most of us that do public speaking. And then you're on the other side of it and you're like, oh, that was such a high. When can I do it again? But the treasure is you cultivating the courage. And then once you face that scary thing in yourself, whatever you're really afraid of, nothing can stop you anymore. You become unstoppable.
Yeah, often in a lot of the epic stories of the hero has to die at this point. They actually lose their life, meaning they lose their old persona. The person that took off from the village, from the Shire, is gone. They don't exist anymore.
Well, in some of my favorite myths are, from Game of Thrones, I'm such a huge fan. Kaleesi had to burn in the fire and be reborn become the dragon, find her dragon. Jon Snow, he was a hero. He had to physically die. Sorry, spoilers, and be reborn as someone else, like not the bastard, but someone else, and not part of this Night Watch, and for his journey. And so there's that kind of, sometimes there's a actual death of the person and rebirth in that. And other times it's the death of the ego in that person. The old self dies. Like, what's another one? Like Jonah and the Whale. He had to go into the whale and basically come to terms with his fears.
That's right. For him, the calling was from God to go and preach in a certain city, and he refused. Right? He thought, I can run away from this, but in running away, God calls up a great storm on the ship he's fleeing, and the sailors kind of get a sense of what's happening, and so they throw him overboard. When they throw him overboard, he's swallowed by the whale. And it's kind of a gestation, a second gestation, right? The old person is dead, and the new person is being prepared for the new life.
And there's always a theme of going into the underworld or going into a cave, going into, and then this is really the unconscious, the metaphor for going within ourselves, to the dark places within ourselves. Campbell says, the cave we dare to enter contains the treasure that we seek. And that is always in all these myths. Even Batman, he fell as a boy. He was this scared boy. His parents died, falls into a well with these bats, and then he comes out transformed by the bats. The bats transformed him. And so we have all these stories, and this is where they come from. They come from this theme, like archetypal theme in human life, is that we all have to undergo this. So we all have to go through our challenges and face that dark night of the soul. And for us to really live a full life, the ego has to die. The ego has to have some kind of transformation.
Yeah, let's talk about the dark night of the soul, because this is an important topic for a lot of people. A lot of our students tell us, I can definitely relate to the dark night of the soul, because it is kind of... let's say the way we experience it individually, it is kind of a depression. It is kind of a loss of meaning in our life, a loss of kind of feeling for the work we're doing, for what we've created in the past. But it's an important aspect of the work because, again, it's teaching us about the temporary nature of this life. That if we are attached to the things we create, and the things we create as ego, as persona, we're missing the point. We're focusing on the wrong thing. We're thinking the external structures of society are going to give me happiness and meaning, and they can only do that temporarily. If we are thinking that's what is going to establish my soul or my sense of the true self in life. Those things cannot give us that kind of solid ground, the rock to build our life on.
Well, even if you have everything, like Jim Carrey famously said, I wish everyone would have tons of money and fame, and realize that's not it. And I think that's really important. A lot of people think, when I get this, I'll be happy. When I get that, I'll be happy. When I find my partner, I'll be happy. And it'll never be enough. That's just the hungriness of the ego. And what we really, truly crave is a divine expression of ourselves, not just ego collecting of access material in the world, or a status in the world. There's something much deeper, such more profound that we can experience in life.
Yeah, we see it in the story of the Buddha very clearly. Here's a man who had everything. He was a prince, very wealthy, highly educated. The dark night of the soul for him came when, he had to leave all that. Even his family and his son and wife, he had to leave that if he really wanted to find himself, find that true self in him. And so he undergoes this transformation, right? And first of all, he almost kills himself trying to do these very difficult ascetic practices that the yogis were teaching at that time. But he finally came to the realization of his true self. Mm-hmm. Then he's able to go back and teach others, right? As the Buddha, as somebody completely different, no longer tied to that identity of the prince, Gautama, but a new person.
Even changing the name, right?
Yeah.
We also, if you think of the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, where Arjuna, the first chapter is, Arjuna is the hero, and Krishna's there, and Arjuna refuses to fight because he goes, how do you fight a battle you can't win? Because if I win, that means my family that I'm fighting is going to die. And if I lose, that means I'm going to die and my other part of my family is going to die. So this is like a fruitless battle. And he drops his arrows and he just sits down and refuses to fight, his refusal. But then Krishna came and to assist that and told him the wisdom of the Gita. In the whole story, before they even started the battle, was all about non-attachment and higher wisdom. So you see, even the hero's journey goes way back thousands of years from the Gita.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's still with us. And that was Jung's work was about keeping those traditions alive, but in a psychological model, in a psychological way, so that we could still continue to understand what is the psyche up to when we undergo these incredible experiences. It's not just about figuring out our social life. That's an important piece, of course. We need to work and we need to take care of our family and all that stuff. But we also need to understand our deeper inclinations. What do we need as real individuals, as real living beings that are having this human experience? And part of it is this ability to transform ourselves continuously.
I think that one of the main things about the hero's journey is really the transformation the hero goes through. And the reason why we refuse the call is because we're not aware of our power yet. So we're not aware of our strength and our courage and our potential. So of course it would make sense to see, oh, I can't do that. That's not for me. That's for other people. But the hero transforms. The hero doesn't realize, in most of these myths, doesn't realize he's part God. Doesn't realize he has this power within him. And through his journey, through facing these obstacles, it pulls out the power. It pulls out their greatness. And greatness is not, it's born within us, but we have to find it within us. And we can't just find it by thinking, oh, I'm great now. I'm going to think positive and put I am great notes on my mirror in the bathroom. That's great. That's great. But what we want to do is we want to go battle that battle within ourselves. And then through that transformation, it's like alchemy happens. This transformation happens in your psyche where that old self, it no longer serves you and it kind of uses its benefits. And this other part of you can be free to emerge. But until you invite that other part in, you're only going to be living on that ego level. But I love that idea that you don't even know what your potential is until you actually take the journey. Like Frodo had no idea. He was a little hobbit, had no idea his power, and also the fears and challenges he had to face. So many great stories of heroes. What about Dante's Inferno?
Dante is a classic one of descent into the underworld, right? To the very heart of the shadow, essentially. And coming back up, right? Now,
re-emerging as a new person, re-emerging and transformed.
That's right. And he has a guide through the underworld, which is Beatrice. She is like his anima, what Jung would call the anima, his soul guiding him on that journey. And so it's a metaphor of this transformation that's very ancient, like you said. It goes back thousands and thousands of years, but it keeps showing up, keeps coming back, because that is essentially what we're here to do in this world, is to it's like a purification of our mind. If we don't face that challenge of facing the dragon, the fear, we are not able to transform, because we're only playing small. We're only playing at spiritual work or at spiritual transformation, and not really doing it.
We're pretending to be spiritual, but we're not really living it. And part of it is facing. It's not just, like he said, imagining figures of light. Jung says that you have to make the darkness conscious, and you have to be and aware of our human nature, and not feel like you're above human fears and insecurities and all the things that us human beings have to deal with. But we have this persona that says, no, I got it all together. And that pressure of keeping that up, we have to come to terms with that within ourselves, because eventually it's going to come knocking us down, whether we choose to take the dark night consciously or it happens to us.
Yeah. And we know that society is made up of individuals, you and I, right? And all these people around us. And if we do our work, if the individual does their work and undergoes this transformation, it will change society. It will transform the world, essentially.
Think about the pandemic, the past 2 years. I mean, it's really made a lot of us go through a dark night of the soul, because we're not in the social environment we're used to being in. Some people are very isolated and alone. The jobs that people have, the great resignation, people are thinking, do I want to go back to that mean boss and commute? Why was I commuting 2 hours a day to go to a job, and when I could just be sitting at home on a computer, like it's the same thing than a cubicle? And I think it really stirred up our culture in a good way. I mean, there's a lot of bad things that happen with it, with the death and sickness and all that. But as far as psychologically, I think we were on a trajectory that something needed to intervene. And so when these things happen, we have to see, well, what's the opportunity here? What's the opportunity in my life when this is over? Hopefully it's over, in a matter of weeks, we'll be kind of going back to a little bit normalcy. Are we going to go back to how we used to be? That's the question. Or are you going to use this challenge to transcend and go to the next level in your life?
Yeah. We are living in very special times, in epic times, and epic times require us to step up, right? To use all our knowledge from psychology, from philosophy, from mythology, to face these challenges. If we don't, if we just say we'll figure it out with the old way of doing things, we're missing the opportunity to transform.
And on a personal level, I moved to Colorado when I was 29, and I was like, I'm going to go on my journey. I'm going to find some new career, and I don't want to be in marketing anymore. And it took me 10 years of refusal. I was doing some investigation, and I was dabbling. I was trying new things, but I never really fully made the leap until I was 39 and finally left the corporate world forever. And it was like, why didn't I do this sooner? But the ego's so powerful. So those of you who feel stuck, it's normal to feel this way. So I think one of the questions you should ask is, which fear is greater, the fear of the unknown or the fear of the known, of just remaining the same, the fear of remaining in that status quo. And if you feel like you're that fear of the unknown, I would go kind of move the energy to, what would happen if nothing changed in my life? What if 20, like I said, 10 years went by and I finally stepped into what I wanted to do with my life? What if that was for you? What if that took another 10 years? What if it took 20 years? What if you don't ever make that choice out of fear? Then if you can get to that, that may motivate you, and you'll be motivated by fear versus demotivated by fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like what you do with it, not what it is in itself.
That's right. On the practical level, we can't run away from our calling, especially if we've really been called and we're saying like Jonah, I cannot run this. I can hide somewhere. We can't. Because everywhere you go, your mind is there. And your mind is what is asking for transformation. And so it'll trip you up. The Upanishads say something like this, that if you do not befriend the mind, the self, the deeper consciousness within you, it becomes an enemy. It acts as an enemy towards you, meaning the mind will turn against you.
It's like you have to deal with it.
You have eventually to deal with it. And it's not so much that it's trying to hurt you, but it's that it's going to try to get your attention at whatever cost. And often we mistake those things for pathology, for accidents, for problems, but it's actually our mind insisting that we pay attention to it.
A good metaphor is a boiling pot. It's like it's that steam. It just builds up, and you have to release that lid, or it's going to pop anyway. So it's better to release the lid gently versus being tossed into it. And for me, there's the times when I left the corporate world, I was, out of my relationship fell apart. My job I was lost, and the house I lived in, I had to change. And it's like it all happened at once. And a lot of people have told me stories like that their whole life turned upside down, and they were like, okay. And I feel like I said to myself, okay, now I can begin. Now my life can begin. And so what usually appears as an ending or a tragedy is the best thing that happened to us. And it's an opportunity for us. It's meant to be disrupted because the status quo can no longer be tolerated. And there's a wisdom within us that does not want the status quo. It's always pushing forward. And so that steam is going to eventually just keep pushing. And you answer the call. That calling is, we're born with it.
And so working with fear and recognizing fear and being able to confront it, right? To move towards it. We're not saying be fearless completely. No one is completely fearless unless they're fools. But to be able to move towards it, to recognize it as, this is part of my mind, right? This is an aspect of my life, and it's an important piece that if I move towards it, something's going to open up. So that's the practical approach right there, that we start to understand fear and hesitation and resistance as a natural part of the process. And then we start to move towards it, to open it up, to accept it.
Instead of running away from it. And facing our fear makes us stronger, more courageous, more powerful, and it transforms us.
That's right.
So great topic today. We are going to be moving into a new topic the next 4 episodes. And what are we talking about, Rob?
We want to talk about trauma and resiliency because it's such an important topic for coaches, for some of you therapists out there and psychologists. We want to start to reframe trauma in a resiliency model, meaning we have strengths, and the things that happen to us that kind of throw us off balance and kind of stay with us in our mind, we need to deal with them. We never advise to ignore the difficult things in life, but we can certainly focus on them in the sense of our strengths, not so much as the wounds that they cause.
And I like to see it as the event happens to us, and the response that our mind gives is a sign of a healthy mind. It found a way to cope and survive. Maybe it's just being hypervigilant in certain situations, but that's a sign of a healthy mind. It's not a dysfunctional mind. It's actually, the mind is supposed to do that. It's supposed to protect us. And so how do we look at that and those mechanisms the mind has created to help us deal with difficult situations in a positive way, in a resilient model, and say, wow, if you could survive that, you could survive anything. Like, wow, look how powerful you are. And instead of seeing yourself as I went through a hard time or I had a difficult past and I'm weaker now because of it. Actually, we're stronger because of it, because your mind is probably stronger than someone who never had a difficulty, just like we talked about the hero's journey. So that's what the topic's going to be about the next 4 episodes. It's going to be very interesting. I can't wait to share it with you. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. We hope to see you next week. And if you are watching us on YouTube, feel free to subscribe to our channel. We would love to have you. Also, put a comment below. Ask us a question, something about the hero's journey. We'd love to answer it. And if you are listening to our podcast, Spotify and Apple iTunes, please subscribe. And if you feel called, leave a review, an honest review, and we'd love to hear. So take care, everyone.
Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Have a great day and happy January.